Meet Sarah and Samantha.
Two cousins obsessed with exploring the vast pop culture landscape, one recommendation at a time.
In each episode, one clueless cousin shares real-time reactions as they navigate the twists and turns of a pop culture topic selected by the other.
From travel to movies,
Little Debbie's to trashy novels.
Get ready to eavesdrop on the candid reactions and dynamic conversations you can only have with family.
This is Foreign and Familiar.
Welcome to Foreign and Familiar for a bonus ep. Sam, welcome back. Happy to see you, as always, for a bonus
Always, Sarah. Highlight of my day, my week, my life is when I get to see you.
Because this is a bonus episode, we are not going to be talking about snacks. We are getting right into the topic today. This is a topic we were both familiar with and just wanted to chat our mutual love for. And that topic is Pride and Prejudice. Books, movies, spin-off shows, everything Pride and Prejudice. So that will be our topic for this bonus up today.
Spoiler alert, we're obsessed. And I think what's been fun about this pod is we're figuring out what it looks like and we're really kind of finding our way, is that there are just these topics that we agree on that we want to talk about, but it doesn't quite fit the format. So that's kind of where these bonus ups are living. So unanimously, we agree that Jim Halpert is trash.
Yes.
This one's a little bit more in the positive, where we unanimously agree that Pride and Prejudice is the best.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we would have discovered our mutual love of Pride and Prejudice had it not been for the pod, because we are constantly texting each other. Have you seen this? Have you watched this? Have you read this? To kind of come up with episode ideas. And so there have been a handful of times where we've discovered, yes, we've both watched or read whatever the topic is and are really interested in it. And this was one of those conversations.
Yes. So Pride and Prejudice, Sarah, you are the book lover. I'm reading more, but you are the bibliophile. That's the word I was looking for.
Sure.
You are the bibliophile in this partnership. So do you want to talk a little bit about Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen? Have you read other Jane Austens, or when were you first introduced to it?
I will never turn down an opportunity to talk about Jane Austen. I think I was first introduced to Pride and Prejudice in 2005 when the Keira Knightley, Matthew McFadyen version of the movie came out, which is probably my favorite version, and we can get into all of the adaptations later. I really love everything Jane Austen. I've read a handful of her books. I've seen, I would say, the vast majority of some movie, TV adaptations that have come out. I am a huge fan, I would say, of that like Regency period female authors. So Jane Austen, the Brontes. I've read the book a handful of times, maybe 2 or 3 times. I have a Jane Austen Funko that lives on my bookshelf. I
think that's so funny.
Yes.
That there's a Jane Austen Funko. So you're going to have to put that on the pod. You're going to have to put that on the pod. For sure.
It's so funny because, as you know, Sam, cousin husband and I really like Funkos. We have quite an extensive collection. When we first bought our house, we were repainting everything. I found a Jane Austen Funko, and of course I had to buy it. And just kind of as a joke, I put her on the bookshelf, and cousin husband was like, she looks great there. I think she needs to stay. So she is currently the only Funko that is on our bookshelf. All of the other Funkos are in the basement in our game room. So she has a place of honor.
I can't believe I've never noticed her before. So that's on me.
I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, please. And we'll put it on the IG. So
of course,
you are a Jane Austen fan.
What about you, Sam? What was your first experience with Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen?
You know, I'm not really sure. We did not read it in high school. So I really don't know what made me check out Pride and Prejudice. I guess I had just always heard that it was a classic. I am familiar with Jane Austen only through Sense and Sensibility, the 1995 movie with Emma Thompson and Hugh Grant and Kate Winslet, a pre-Titanic Kate Winslet. Yes.
Stellar cast.
I had wanted to read Pride and Prejudice. I did, and I just loved the story. I thought the writing was excellent, but Elizabeth Bennet is such a literary heroine, especially at the time. This was written in the 1700s, 1800s, where women did not really have any type of autonomy. Marriage was a social construct. We could argue if marriage is still a social construct. I think that's probably for a different conversation.
Right.
But for Jane Austen to write such a strong female character, especially for that time, I probably reread it every couple years, and then I will watch any and all of the adaptations. The story never gets old to me. And that includes Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which came out semi-recently. I went to the theater for that.
That's impressive.
Theater for that one. So I don't want to brag or anything, but I like Pride and Prejudice. So.
Me too.
Anyway.
Last thing that I will add of my love of Jane Austen is I love Elizabeth Bennet as a character. Emma Woodhouse will forever be my favorite heroine. So she does.
I'm not even sure where she's from. She's from Emma?
Emma, yeah.
Duh. Okay. So I need to read that.
We might have to do an Emma episode. She's my girl, but Elizabeth Bennet is a close second.
Let's just give a really, really top overview. It revolves around the Bennet family and their 5 daughters. Elizabeth Bennet, who is our protagonist, is the second eldest daughter. The book starts off right away. The first line of the book is, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." So starts from the beginning that this is going to be all about courtship, all about marrying off the different daughters and helping the Bennets improve their station in life. So the oldest sister, I'm going to say Meg, but that is Little Women, which is another
that
we
is
haven't
Little
talked
Women.
about. That's a good one too. So, well, okay. Well, now that you're thinking about it, Elizabeth Bennet and Jo March, very similar.
Yes.
Very similar.
Very similar.
I liked, okay, well, that's a whole different
That's
conversation.
another conversation.
So why don't you take it from who the older sister is then? Because clearly I'm a little fuzzy.
Start talking about Laurie too.
Yeah.
So
Timothy,
right.
Laurie was also Timothée Chalamet, but he was also a very young Christian Bale in that first version. So
that was good. Next season, bonus up Little Women.
Yes, and Emma season 3.
Yes.
Okay,
Emma,
go ahead.
3.
Okay,
Got it. Okay,
done. Anyway.
The Bennet family, financially, they're okay, but they don't have enough to set their daughters up for a successful future. So a lot of it relies on them marrying financially stable, dare I say, wealthy men. So Mr. Charles Bingley, who has a fortune of, I don't know, it's like £5,000 a year or something like that, moved into the neighborhood and suddenly everyone is interested in him. He does seem really interested in the oldest Bennet daughter, Jane. When Charles Bingley moves into town, his friend Fitzwilliam Darcy also comes into town and is not met with the same enthusiasm, I would say.
I literally just almost sighed so loud when you said Fitzwilliam Darcy because goals.
Yeah.
Goals. Anyway, so Bingley and Jane court a little bit. Bingley goes away and Elizabeth Bennet blames Darcy for that. He says that Darcy got into Bingley's ear and said you could find someone so much better than her. And so her and Darcy have an adversarial relationship. She's just really unimpressed by him. She calls him out to his face. She's very vocal about not wanting to be married or thinking that this whole ritual is really stupid. But she is very mad at Darcy because she believes that Darcy ended up being the catalyst to really hurt her sister. Before Darcy got in town, it seems like it was going really well with Bingley. One of my favorite quotes in the entire book that comes pretty early in this moment, in the first interaction between Darcy and Elizabeth, where they get really heated and into it. And she's breaking it down to her mother after, because of course her mother is like, what's her name in the room? Is like, what's her name? Any other mother that basically is saying, you know, this guy is really well off and you need to deal with it. You need to deal with some of his quirks. And, you know, what about this? Like, you really kind of gave it to him and he doesn't, you know, he might not look on our family honestly. And she says, it's one of my favorite literary quotes ever. She says, I could easily forgive his pride if he had not mortified mine.
Mm-hmm.
I just really like that. It's a way to assert, you know, I can think about that, but he was the one that transgressed first and he was the one that offended me first. And so I actually really don't have time, Mom, to care about his pride because I'm working on restoring mine because he embarrassed me.
Right.
You know?
Right. So good. Darcy, seemingly out of the blue, I would say. I don't feel like, at least from today's like perspective, we get a lot of hints that he's really interested in Elizabeth, but he does propose to her, at which point she shuts him down, rightfully so, because he's been quite cold and callous toward her.
I think on a reread, that's where a reread or a rewatch, once you know the story, you can really pick out in the dialogue how into her he is. But yes, at some point, he comes in and proposes to her and shocks her.
Yeah.
Shocks her. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Circumstances unfold where they're put into these situations together throughout the rest of the book. There is sort of this courtship that unfolds. Arguably, she doesn't really seem interested until she sees his house, and then suddenly she's interested.
I cannot believe you would say that. If we were in the same room, I would slap your whore mouth if we were in the same room right now. I can't believe you said that. I cannot believe that you just said that.
Because I know it's a contentious point.
She is not interested. Elizabeth Bennet is not interested in any of it.
No.
In any of it. I always read that as that was never going to be her motivating factor, but it was nice that after she saw his heart that he had that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know they do kind of poke fun at it in the 1995 edition where I don't even remember who it is. I think it might be Jane. Actually says to Elizabeth, it's so interesting that you didn't like him until you saw his house, and she kind of chuckles a little bit. So I think that I think they can make light of it. So I know it is a contentious point, though.
For our listeners that maybe are not familiar with the plot, Elizabeth finds out a lot about Darcy's background.
Yes.
Finds out a lot about what a stand-up guy he is. Darcy leaves to take care of a family matter for the Bennets and never puts the younger sister on blast for being a younger sister. So no, she falls in love with his honor. She falls in love with his honor.
Of course.
And she is someone that would rather be alone than in a marriage that's unfulfilled. So I've never heard the debate about the house. Obviously, I'm having a very strong reaction right now, but that's just my opinion. That's my opinion.
It 100% is. She finds out about his character. She realizes that he's not rude and off-putting like she thought. He's just very reserved because he's been burned a lot in the past, but he is very loyal and very caring toward his friends. He is willing to help out the Bennet family in a very difficult situation and does not ask for any sort of repayment whatsoever. And at that point, she realizes that she kind of made a mistake in turning him down. Maybe she is interested.
So it is I would say, a wonderful love story that really takes its time and is worth reading, and it's very, very satisfying. Let's get into adaptations real quick. So obviously, I would say I think the book is the best. Like anything else, the book is going to be better than any of the adaptations. But there has been absolutely no shortage of adaptations. There was a pretty prominent BBC adaptation that was over miniseries in the mid-90s. I think Colin Firth was Mr. Darcy in that. Is that correct?
Colin Firth,
a pre-Bridget Jones Colin Firth.
Right.
And there was the Keira Knightley 2005 version that you mentioned, which I believe was nominated for several Academy Awards. There is the aforementioned Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which sees a Lily James as Elizabeth Bennet. And then, Sarah, I think one that I haven't seen, but one that you feel pretty strongly about is Lost in Austen.
Yes, I was so excited to revisit that. It's a 4-episode series where a girl from 2008, obsessed with Pride and Prejudice, finds herself suddenly inside the book, kind of messing up the plot and the way it should go. I really liked it. Another one that I really enjoyed, which is kind of a sequel, I would say, to Pride and Prejudice, is Death Comes to Pemberley, which is a 3-episode series that came out in 2013. We are seeing characters much, much later in life dealing with a murder on the grounds of Pemberley. And so it's all of the same characters from Pride and Prejudice trying to figure out who was murdered and why. So that's a really good series too.
That's funny. That sounds like Clue, but just with an intellectual property. But I guess that's what that's what Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is, though, too. Like, it's the whole story, but then all of a sudden Elizabeth Bennet is like chopping off zombie heads and stuff, and they're fighting back to back. Her and Darcy are fighting back to back on the zombies. But let's talk about some of the traditional adaptations, because I think that's probably the bread and butter there. I think that the Keira Knightley one is really great. I will say, you said it a little bit earlier, and I did not know this until he just recently won all the award circuit, but it is Matthew Macfadyen. There's an extra Y. Yeah, there's an extra Y. What? If you look at his name, there's an extra Y. Here's the thing. I can't really be into this version anymore because I just view him as Tom Wamsgams from Succession.
That's fair.
And there is no one that could be any more of a polar opposite of Darcy than Tom Wamsgams. So I struggle with this version right now. I do.
Right.
I have to be honest.
That's fair. I haven't seen Succession. It is on my list of things that I want to watch. I think post Pride and Prejudice, Matthew Macfadyen, is that how you say it? Gosh, I've been saying it wrong for years.
I believe so. Well, there's a sneaky extra Y. Until I heard someone say it, and then I thought that person said it wrong, but then it was pretty consistent on the circuit.
Following Pride and Prejudice, he did a couple of characters that I saw that were very similar to Mr. Darcy. So I think it kind of solidified that role for me. I think even if he does play somebody who's very slimy and not great, I would still think of him as Mr. Darcy. I don't know. He was in the Charles Dickens adaptation of Little Dorrit. He played a really great character in that. He was in, I think, this show called Whitechapel, where he was this detective trying to solve like the Jack the Ripper murders, and he was a really stand-up guy there. So I think it's like locked in for me.
You just don't know the Tom Wamsgams character.
That's true.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But I hope that hope springs eternal. I hope that you can hold on to it. I cannot. I didn't even realize it was the same actor until one of my friends told me. And I said, I can't. So anyway, a couple things I do just want to say real quick as we're getting ready to close up here on Pride and Prejudice. The name of the book, and they really do talk quite a bit about pride and prejudice that people see. All of the characters are examining both of those things throughout the course. Elizabeth is prejudiced to Darcy at the beginning, and, you know, her pride is mortified, his is mortified. And it's really kind of a look and a take on how both of those elements factor into romance, factor into society, factor into your life. So I think it's a good name and an apt name for the manuscript that we have.
I think so as well.
The only other thing I have is that it is very, very highly acclaimed. In 2003, the BBC conducted a poll for the UK's best loved book. Pride and Prejudice came second, only behind, would you guess what it came behind?
Probably a classic.
Guess. The stakes are so low, just guess.
They are so low. I'm gonna guess Jane Eyre.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that was stupid. I should have known that.
Well, and that also makes sense because 2003, I think, was when the Lord of the Rings started coming out.
Exactly.
In 2008, Pride and Prejudice came in first in a list of 101 best books ever written. You know who is not a fan of Pride and Prejudice?
Who?
Mark Twain.
Wow.
He stated, every time I read Pride and Prejudice, I want to dig Austen up and beat her over the skull with her own shin bone. Twain wrote in one letter to a friend.
So why did he keep reading it? Is my question.
Honestly, have you read Mark Twain?
Yeah.
And how is he as a writer? I haven't read him.
It's fine, I think.
It just strikes me as one of these, like, I don't get why everybody likes it. It's nothing gives me meaning. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. It definitely, his work has not left as much of an impression as Jane Austen's has on me. So
we are a different demographic, though, probably for who he's writing for and who she's writing for. But regardless of the fact, I think that it's just interesting to see that all of this, because this book was written so early in the 1800s, that it has been examined by a lot of our classic authors, a lot of the people that are in the literary world. I just think it's good writing in general, whether you like the characters, whether you like the story. It's really beautifully written. It flows very well. It's very tightly edited.
And at the same time, though, I think it's an easy book to read. Even now, many years later, where, we don't even speak in complete sentences anymore. It's still something that's fairly easy to read.
What did Mark Twain even write? Huckleberry Finn?
Huck Finn. I don't even know.
Everlasting?
No, that wasn't him.
I don't know.
No, I don't even know who wrote that. I need to revisit that book.
Is that hilarious that I said Tuck Everlasting was written by Mark Twain? That's
have you
hilarious.
read that or watched the movie?
No. Fine. Is that with Jonathan Jackson? Maybe I would.
Maybe? Who's in that? It's what's her face? Alexis Bledel.
Hold on, I just want to see what else Mark Twain wrote.
A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which there was a Disney movie made called A Kid in King Arthur's Court that was really good based on that book.
Okay, so I have seen that. And then it looks like he wrote Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Right. Those are two different ones. I guess that's a whole series.
Yeah.
Whatever. Mark Twain can suck it. He can suck it. Maybe that's a terrible thing that I just said. I don't know. Well, the adventure of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer are being called the great American novel. But what I have been saying is that I've been trying to read these classics over the past couple years, and some are good, but a lot of them are not great. So anyway, this was way too long of an aside on Mark Twain. Closing out, if somebody isn't familiar with Pride and Prejudice, hasn't read it in a while, maybe has read it, hasn't seen any adaptations, how can someone get started?
I think probably watching is a good place to get started, especially if you're not somebody who has read a lot of classics. Hearing the dialogue and seeing the way that the characters are acting, I think really helps understand the words on the page. The 1995 version, I think I watched on Hulu. Lost in Austen, Death Comes to Pemberley are both on Prime. Not that those are good examples of the story, but those, if somebody's interested in those, I would say start with the 1995 one. If you have Hulu, it's longer, so they fit more of the story in, and I think it's a good place to start.
I would not start with Pride and Prejudice and zombies. That would not be my recommendation to enter the fray on Pride and Prejudice. But once you get the story of it, I think it's a lot of fun. So
So anyway, I guess it depends on your preferences. If you're somebody who's read classics before or is a big reader, start with the book. If you're not, maybe start with the movie.
Then you can join all of us ladies across the globe, across generations, across time, space, and spectrum that just sigh when you hear the name Darcy.
Mm-hmm.
And also cheer when you hear the name Elizabeth Bennet.
Of course.
We've made it through this episode without my pride being mortified, so thank you for that, Sarah.
Of course. Nobody's pride was mortified in this episode. We hope.
And therefore, we can care about each other's pride because our prides aren't mortified. So,
indeed. Thank you so much for listening. Follow us if you don't already at FoFanPod on Instagram for more Pride and Prejudice discussions. We'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks for eavesdropping on us.
If you can't get enough of the Cousin Chronicles, head over to Instagram and follow @FauxFamPod for more in-depth info and behind-the-scenes details.
Or email us at foreignfamiliarpod@gmail.com.
Foreign and Familiar is a Flynn & Flynn production.
The theme is Colorful by Allerlie von Nicolai.